This is the Northwest Tank Line Super Bowl show coming to you from Radio Row, Mandalay Bay Convention Center. Super Bowl 58 this week, right here in Las Vegas, featuring the Kansas City Chiefs and the San Francisco 49ers. Now, a lot of people talking about the teams, and they talk about the 49ers, they talk about the Chiefs. Folks, there's a third team that's on the field Sunday, and those are called the Officials. Our next guest knows all about it, Dean Blandino, Fox Sports NFL rules analyst, of course, previously the NFL's VP of Officiating, and currently with the XFL. Dean, thanks so much for stopping by.
Thanks for having me. Always good to chat with you guys.
What's great is seeing you. Unfortunately, I know we were talking about this, Mike Pereira, our good friend who was on with you last year when we visited you with Radio Row. For people that don't know, Mike had serious, and I'm talking extremely serious, back surgery. I talked to Mike maybe just a little bit before Christmas. I think it was, over 10, 11 hours, something like that?
Yeah.
The amount of vertebrae that were fused, and this was like crazy.
It was an extensive surgery. Everything went well. He's rehabbing now. He's up and about, doing really well. I saw him at the championship game in San Francisco a couple of weeks ago, and he's tracking toward being back pretty soon.
And that's great because he's one of the quality people in this game and one of the quality people that we've been lucky enough to meet over the years, and wish Mike nothing but the best. Now, let's talk a little bit about Sunday. I just mentioned everyone talks about the Chiefs. Everybody talks about the 49ers. What's it like for the officials as they prepare for Super Bowl Sunday?
Yeah, so they've been preparing. The crew, they would have been notified right after the wild card games. So they know they got the game. Then they're going to start right away. Zoom calls, conference calls, getting together, talking about the potential, the teams. At that point, you still had a bunch of teams left. As the teams get knocked out, now you're kind of, once the championship games are over, now you can really focus on the Chiefs and the Niners, looking at their game film, getting ready. Then they get here. It's a little bit different. The lead-in, normal game, Sunday, you're there Saturday, you have a pregame meeting, you have a meal, and then you work. Here you get in Thursday. They do a big dinner with the families, which is was always one of my favorite events of the year, because with the officials, there's so much sacrifice on the part of their families, because these officials, they're gone, 17, 18 weeks during the season, 4 weeks during the preseason. And so to be able to celebrate this accomplishment with their families, then they'll do a walkthrough on Friday, Saturday, walk through at the stadium, go through the coin toss and go through the national anthem and everything that they have to do. And then Saturday have a pregame meeting, and then Sunday didn't work the game.
Dean, it's interesting because we always talk about players and how they prepare. They look at the opposition. They try to scout. They look at tendencies. Do officials do anything like that at all when they look at the team, particularly in this game, that the teams that they're working with?
They do. They'll look for tendencies. They'll look for formational things. What do they like to do in short yardage? Is there anything special? Do they have in terms of their defensive, what fronts do they run? Anything like that can just help the officials anticipate. And, they're not going to sit there and break it down to the extent that the teams will, but they're going to just look for those tendencies that can help them be in the right position to make the right call on Sunday.
It's interesting. I know, talking to Mike in the past, not a fan of the All-Star Cruise.
No, he's always been I kind of see both sides of it. I think the crew, I like the continuity of the crew working together all year, and then the teams are together all year, and then the crews will get together and work 17 weeks, 18 weeks, and then they get broken up in the postseason. The flip side of that is you want your best officials in these games, because these are the most important games of the year, and you don't want a really good official sitting at home because maybe their crew didn't grade out that well. So I kind of see both sides. I think one of the things we did was just try to, within that all-star individual-based system, try to keep some crew members together whenever you could.
Dean Blandino is our guest, rules analyst for Fox Sports on Sundays. Of course, all their NFL coverage. Also the head of officiating for the XFL. We'll talk about that in a second. Big picture-wise, some of the rules that, I have a beef with, and we'll get into it in a second. But what are some of the things you'd like to see changed rules-wise at the NFL level?
I think the game's in a good place. I don't like when we change a bunch of rules. I think that makes it harder for the officials. It makes it harder for everybody. You're going to learn a whole new thing, coaches, players, officials. I think the league could do a better job just from a transparency standpoint and being able to explain things more, be able to let people in and listen to the conversations that maybe the replay booth is having, the command center is having with the referee. because I think that's something we've done in the spring leagues. And it's kind of changed the narrative around officiating. And they understand. People, they may not always agree with it, but they have a better understanding of what went into that decision.
Well, I think one of the things, and it's funny because doing the play-by-play for the Lions in the CFL, my color guy's a former quarterback in the league, and he sees guys getting grazed now, and it's a 15-yard penalty. And, he's losing his marbles because it's football. I understand the black and white of it. Because if you strike the head in any manner, whether it was flagrant, whether it was accidental, the referee, the officials can make the call. There's no judgment call. It's black and white, right? Yet at the same time, there's a part of me that says this is a contact sport. And sometimes I see some of these penalties, and by the book today, they are penalties. But there's a part of me that says, maybe I'm too old school, Dean, but I don't see it as a penalty.
I know, and I think that's part of you do from a rules perspective. You're trying to give the officials as much direction as possible. And right when it's black and white, you can I think ideally be more consistent and not living in this gray area. But I do think you have to give the officials some discretion because if the contact wasn't forcible or if it was incidental, those types of things, that's a 15-yard penalty that is so significant and has such a big impact on the outcome of the game. So I think you want to give the officials some discretion, but I think you have to kind of at least be consistent in your direction, your messaging, so the officials can be as consistent as possible in their calls.
You know what? The other one, too, that sometimes gets me is the slide. And I just feel for the defenders because they are in just such a real tough situation because they're going to commit themselves, and if that quarterback slides and they make any sort of contact, well, it's a penalty. And, there are times when guys don't slide. We saw it with Josh Allen a couple of weeks ago where everybody thought he was going to slide, a little juke move, and he's off to the races. So I don't know what can be done there because I think the defenders are in almost a lose-lose situation.
Yeah, that's a tough one, and we've always, you talk to especially the quarterbacks, if you want the protection, you have to slide early. You got to get down early, and if the defender is already committed when you start your slide, then that contact is legal provided you don't go to the head neck area. It's a tough play on the defense. It's a tough play to officiate. Because these quarterbacks, they know, and they're trying to push the envelope, and they're going to slide at the last possible moment, and then there's a big hit, and there's that reaction, and it's hard in that moment to kind of separate the emotion of it and just not throw the flag. So you want them to get down early, slide early, and then officiate it accordingly.
Dean Blandino is our guest. You see him on Sundays with Fox's NFL coverage. He is their rules analyst. Here's one for you, and I got into this with a buddy of mine a couple of weeks ago watching a playoff game. I can't remember. Somebody was diving for the goal line. Ball comes out, goes through the end zone, touchback. Defense gets the ball. What alternatives are there to that rule? Because it just seems so unfair from an offensive standpoint. And a lot of times the defense doesn't even gain possession. Yeah. They just get possession because the ball went through the end zone.
Yeah, I think a lot of people – I personally like the rule. I think the end zone's different. I think that the punitive part of it is, ball security is really important, especially down at the end zone. But I get it. I get that you just lose control of the ball, and it just happens to hit the pylon where maybe if it was 3 inches this way, they would have kept possession. Maybe I know they're going to talk about it this offseason. Is there a world where you say, hey, if the defense doesn't recover, the offense keeps the ball, but we move them back, right? Maybe it's the 10-yard line, the 20. I think that's an option, and we'll see. We'll see where the NFL lands on that.
You are the head of officiating for the XFL. I talked to our good friend Mike, as we mentioned.
Yeah.
One of the things we touched on during our conversation was the fact that in the XFL, you guys are going to give the offense a little bit of a break in terms of penalties down near the goal line situation. And he specifically pointed out that Detroit-Dallas game as an example. So it seems like you're not going to – the penalty won't be as punitive.
Well, it's the half the distance. There's a change there. And so now with the XFL and the USFL, they've merged, so now it'll be called the United Football League going forward. And so we're excited about some of the things and changes we're able to make. So one of the things is eliminating half the distance because you have a situation like that Detroit game where the Lions get penalized 5 yards for the illegal touching based on the reporting deal. So they go from the 2 to the 7, and then the Cowboys jump offside, and that penalty is only enforced half the distance to the goal line. So in the UFL, it would go 5 yards. It would go the full 5 yards. So that's just a little tweak in terms of just trying to make that penalty enforcement, more equitable. And then there's some other changes that we're excited about to be able to try some different things.
How much fun are you having doing it?
I love it. It's a lot of fun, and it's different, and you're able to. With the NFL, there's a structure. And, to make rules changes, you got to go through a competition committee process. You got to go through a voting process. With the spring leagues, we can make changes and experiment a little bit more. And I think that's good for the game, because it's good for the NFL to look at these things that maybe, hey, we could take a part of that and incorporate it into our game.
Yeah, because when you look at rule changes, particularly Major League Baseball, and maybe I'm comparing apples to oranges, but at least they have the luxury of a minor league system where they can implement some of these rule changes. It works, maybe it doesn't, and then they put it in the big leagues. Unfortunately for the NFL, there is no, quote, minor league, but if the XFL is showing something, and maybe they like it, right?
Yeah, exactly right.
All right, Dean, we're going to let you run. Thanks so much for stopping by. Always a treat talking to you, and continued success.
Thanks for having me.